In the vast firmament of the Catholic Church, few stars shine with the intensity of Saint Thomas Aquinas. Angelic doctor, incomparable master, and saint of profound devotion, his life and work continue to illuminate the path of faith and reason. This text immerses us in the extraordinary life of one of the greatest saints and thinkers in the history of the Church. Chapter 1. The Birth of a Light. In the majestic castle of Roccasecca, situated in the hills of medieval Italy, the year 1225 witnessed the birth of one who would forever change Christian thought. Landulfo of Aquino and Theodora of Teate, nobles of illustrious lineage, joyfully welcomed their son Thomas, unaware of the providential destiny that awaited him. The early days of little Thomas were marked by celestial signs. It is said that one night while he slept in his cradle, a ray of light illuminated the room without causing any harm, a portent of the light he would bring to the church. His mother, a woman of deep piety, had a dream in which a holy hermit revealed to her that her son would be a star that would illuminate the world. Thomas's childhood unfolded in an environment of nobility and virtue. From a very young age, he showed a natural inclination toward God's matters. The castle servants recounted how the child, barely able to speak, constantly asked, "What is God?" already showing the profound inquietude that would mark his life. The castle environment, with its chapel and moments of prayer, nurtured the seed of faith in the little boy's heart. The monks who visited Roccasecca were astonished by the attention with which the child listened to sacred stories and the lives of saints, memorizing them with extraordinary ease. The nobility of his character manifested from his earliest years. Unlike other children of his status, Thomas exhibited uncommon gentleness and humility. He shared his food with the poor who approached the castle and spent long hours in silent contemplation, as if his soul was already in communion with the divine. Chapter 2. The Years of Formation. The decision to send young Thomas to the monastery of Monte Cassino marked the beginning of his path towards sainthood. At just 5 years old, his parents entrusted him to the Benedictines, following the tradition of noble families and hoping that one day he would become abbot of such a prestigious monastery. At Monte Cassino, Thomas found a world that captivated his young spirit. The ancient manuscripts in the library, the Gregorian chants resonating in the abbatial church, and the peaceful rhythm of monastic life shaped his mind. The monks soon noticed that they were not dealing with an ordinary oblate. His capacity for understanding and his prodigious memory left them astonished. Study hours became moments of delight for young Thomas. While other children sought play and distraction, he immersed himself in sacred texts and the writings of the Church Fathers. His questions, deep and precise, revealed an extraordinary mind seeking to penetrate divine mysteries. The influence of the Benedictine monks left an indelible mark on his formation. From them, he learned not only letters and sacred sciences, but also the value of contemplative silence and the importance of combining study with prayer. The Benedictine motto, Ora et Labora, became the foundation of his spiritual life. The years at Monte Cassino were also times of trials. Frederick II's incursions into the region forced Thomas to temporarily abandon the monastery, but this seemingly adverse circumstance was providential, leading him to the next chapter of his life, the University of Naples. Chapter 3. The Test of Faith. Thomas's entry into the University of Naples marked the beginning of an era of crucial discoveries and decisions. It was there that he met the Dominican friars, becoming deeply impressed by their life of study and preaching. The seed of his vocation began to germinate, but the path would not be easy. Thomas's decision to join the order of preachers unleashed a family storm. His parents, who had dreamed of seeing him as abbot of Monte Cassino, could not accept their son choosing a mendicant order. His brothers, following paternal orders, kidnapped him while he was traveling to Paris and took him back to the family castle. For a year, Thomas remained a prisoner at the castle of Monte San Giovanni. His relatives used every means to make him change his mind. arguments, pleas, threats, and even the temptation of flesh, sending a courtesan to his cell to break his resolve. Thomas, armed with a lit ember, expelled her and traced a cross on the wall, before which he prayed for the gift of perpetual chastity. The women of the family, especially his mother and sisters, tried to persuade him with tears and pleas. But Thomas, with sweetness and firmness, explained that his calling came from God and that no earthly love could compare to divine love. His elder sister, seeing Thomas's unshakable determination, began bringing him theology books, inadvertently becoming an accomplice in his vocation. Finally, faced with the immutability of his decision and pressured by the intervention of the Pope and the Emperor, his family relented. Thomas was released and was able to reunite with the Dominicans, demonstrating that true nobility does not reside in inherited titles, but in fidelity to God's call. Chapter 4. The Student of Albert the Great. The encounter with Albert the Great in Cologne marked a turning point in Thomas's life. The great Dominican master immediately recognized the genius hidden behind his new student's silent and corpulent exterior, whom the companions called the mute ox of Sicily. Classes with Albert the Great opened new horizons in Thomas's thought. The master introduced him to the study of Aristotle, whose recently recovered works were revolutionizing the intellectual world of the time. Thomas's ability to understand and synthesize Aristotelian thought with Christian doctrine astonished his master. During a public dispute, when Thomas brilliantly defended a complex thesis, Albert the Great prophetically exclaimed, "We call him the mute ox, but a day will come when his doctrinal mooing will be heard throughout the world." This prediction began to come true sooner than expected when Thomas started to stand out in academic circles for his clarity of thought and theological depth. The relationship between master and disciple transcended the purely academic. Albert the Great became Thomas's mentor and spiritual guide, helping him develop not only his intellect, but also his inner life. The long conversations between them laid the foundations for what would become the great Thomistic synthesis between faith and reason. The study period in Cologne was also a time of personal maturation. Thomas learned to combine contemplative life with intellectual activity, establishing a balance that would characterize all his later work. His humility and dedication to study became an example for his peers. Chapter 5. The emergence of the angelic doctor. Thomas's appointment as a professor in Paris marked the beginning of his most fruitful period. His lectures attracted students from all over Europe, captivated by his ability to explain the deepest truths with crystal clarity. His teaching method, based on the sincere search for truth, revolutionized medieval pedagogy. Academic disputes became the stage where his genius shone. With patience and precision, Thomas unraveled the most complex arguments, always finding the point of truth in opposing opinions. His famous phrase, "In the goodness of being lies the essence of beauty," reflected not only his philosophical thought, but also his method of dialogue. The fame of his wisdom began to spread beyond university walls. Popes and kings sought his counsel, while students and teachers turned to him to resolve their doubts. However, Thomas maintained an astonishing humility, attributing all his knowledge to the grace of God. During this period, he began writing his first important works. His commentary on Peter Lombard's sentences already revealed the originality of his thought. Long nights of study alternated with hours of prayer before the crucifix, where Thomas found inspiration for his writings. His work capacity was prodigious. It is said that he could dictate to several secretaries simultaneously on different subjects without losing track of any. However, this intense activity never caused him to neglect his spiritual life. For him, study was a form of prayer, and the search for truth was a path to God. Chapter 6. The Summa Theologica. The creation of the Sum. Theologica represents the pinnacle of Thomistic thought. This monumental work, initially conceived as a manual for beginner students, would become the most complete synthesis of medieval Christian thought. Thomas began his writing with humility, seeking to present the truths of faith in an orderly and accessible manner. The structure of the Sum reveals Thomas's organizational genius. Divided into three main parts, the work systematically addresses all aspects of Catholic theology: God, creation, man, morality, sacraments, and the ultimate end of human beings. Each question is treated with a rigorous method that examines arguments for and against before reaching a well-founded conclusion. Working on the Sum occupied the last years of his life. Thomas devoted long hours to its writing, alternating study with moments of intense prayer. It is said that he was frequently seen levitating during his prayers before the Blessed Sacrament, where he sought illumination for his work. The depth and clarity of the Sum astonished his contemporaries. In it, Thomas achieved the perfect synthesis between Aristotelian reason and Christian faith, demonstrating that there is no contradiction between the two, but a profound harmony. His treatment of topics such as the existence of God, human nature, and ethics remains a reference to this day. However, the work remained unfinished. After a mystical experience during the Mass of St. Nicholas in 1273, Thomas declared, "All that I have written seems straw compared to what I have seen." This episode marks the end of his written production and the beginning of a new stage in his spiritual life. Chapter 7. The Philosopher of God. Thomas Aquinas' philosophical contribution transformed Western thought. His ability to integrate Aristotelian philosophy with Christian theology created a new intellectual paradigm. The 5 ways to demonstrate the existence of God became a pillar of Catholic philosophical thought. The originality of his thought was particularly evident in his understanding of being. For Thomas, existence is the fundamental act that makes all things. His distinction between essence and existence provided a new perspective for understanding the relationship between God and creation, between the natural and the supernatural. In the field of ethics, Thomas developed a moral theory based on the pursuit of the ultimate happiness of human beings. His understanding of virtues and natural law established an ethical framework that harmoniously combines practical reason with divine revelation. Thomistic anthropology presents an integral vision of the human being as a unity of body and soul. Against the dualisms of his time, Thomas defended the goodness of the body and its importance in spiritual life. His understanding of humans as the image of God founded an anthropology that respects both the natural dignity and the supernatural vocation of man. St. Thomas's political thought also left an indelible mark. His conception of the common good and natural law profoundly influenced the development of the Church's social doctrine. For him, politics should be oriented toward virtue and human flourishing, always in harmony with the ultimate supernatural end. Chapter 8. The Master of Paris. The University of Paris was the main stage where Thomas developed his magisterium. His classes became memorable events, where students from all over Europe gathered to listen to his brilliant expositions. Thomas's teaching method, based on dialogue and the sincere search for truth, revolutionized medieval pedagogy. Public debates were particularly intense moments. Thomas stood out for his ability to maintain serenity amidst the most heated disputes. His method consisted of first presenting opposing arguments with complete honesty, then responding to them with clarity and precision. This approach earned him the respect even of his intellectual adversaries. His relationship with students was particularly notable. Despite his immense wisdom, Thomas maintained an attitude of humble closeness. It is said that he frequently interrupted his explanations to answer his students' most basic questions, convinced that truth should be accessible to all who sincerely sought it. During this period, Thomas had to face significant controversies. The most significant was the opposition to the use of Aristotle in theology. With patience and wisdom, he demonstrated how philosophy could be a valuable ally of faith, provided the proper distinction between the two was maintained. The years in Paris were also a time of intense literary production. In addition to his regular classes, Thomas wrote biblical commentaries, philosophical treatises, and theological works. His work capacity was astonishing. It is said that he could dictate to several secretaries simultaneously on different subjects. Chapter 9. The Defender of Truth. In an era of intense theological debates, Thomas emerged as a tireless defender of Catholic truth. His controversies with the Latin Averroists, who proposed a double truth between faith and reason, demonstrated his ability to defend faith without compromising reason. For Thomas, the defense of truth was not merely an intellectual activity, but a service to the church and souls. His polemical writings, especially against those who denied the mendicant religious life, reveal a burning zeal for truth combined with exemplary charity toward his adversaries. Disputes with secular masters in Paris tested his temperament. When some professors questioned the legitimacy of mendicant orders, Thomas responded with his work against the impugners of the worship of God and religion, defending not only his order but also the ideal of religious life in general. His defense of truth also extended to the field of natural philosophy. When some conservative theologians wanted to prohibit the study of Aristotle, Thomas demonstrated how natural philosophy could contribute to the knowledge of God, provided it was correctly understood and used. Humility characterized his search for truth. Although firm in his convictions, Thomas was always willing to examine opposing arguments and recognize what might be true in them. His famous phrase, "The study of truth is the most perfect, sublime, profitable, and joyful of all human endeavors," reveals his fundamental attitude toward truth. Chapter 10. The Mystic and the Sage. Behind the intellectual giant hid a mystic with profound spiritual experience. Long hours of prayer before the Blessed Sacrament were the source of his wisdom. His contemporaries recounted how he was frequently seen in ecstasy during the celebration of Mass. Thomas's spiritual life was marked by intense Eucharistic devotion. He composed liturgical texts for the Feast of Corpus Christi, including hymns like Pange Lingua and Tantum Ergo, which are still sung in the Church today. His treatise on the Eucharist in the Summa Theologica reflects not only his theological understanding, but also his mystical experience of the sacrament. Thomas's mystical experiences intensified in his later years. During a Mass in the chapel of St. Nicholas, he had a vision that profoundly transformed him. After this event, he declared that everything he had written seemed straw compared to what he had seen, though he never revealed the content of this experience. His spirituality was characterized by deep humility. Despite his immense wisdom, Thomas considered himself a mere student of divine truth. His favorite prayer before study reveals this attitude: "Ineffable Creator, grant me to penetrate with my intellect the secrets of your love." The union between contemplation and action in Thomas's life inspired later generations. He demonstrated that intellectual study and research, when oriented toward God and performed with love, can be a path to sanctification. Chapter 11. The Last Days. The last months of Thomas's life were marked by a profound spiritual transformation. After his mystical experience on December 6, 1273, he abandoned writing the Summa Theologica, leaving it unfinished. When his secretary Reginald urged him to continue, he replied, "I cannot, because all that I have written seems straw compared to what I have seen." In January 1274, Pope Gregory VI summoned him to the Council of Lyon. Despite his delicate health, Thomas undertook the journey. During the trip, his condition rapidly deteriorated. Passing by his niece Francesca's castle in Mainz, he fell gravely ill. He spent his final days at the Cistercian monastery of Fossa Nova, where the monks cared for him with great devotion. Even on his deathbed, Thomas continued teaching. At the monks' request, he dictated a commentary on the Song of Songs, his last work. Before receiving the viaticum, he made a moving profession of faith in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. I receive you, price of the redemption of my soul, viaticum of my pilgrimage, by whose love I have studied, watched, and worked. His last act was a supreme testimony to the union of faith and reason that had characterized his entire life. He died on March 7th, 1274, surrounded by monks singing the divine office. His last words were of comfort to those around him, assuring them that death was not the end, but the beginning of true life. Chapter 12. The Eternal Legacy. Saint Thomas's influence on the Church and Western culture has been immense and enduring. His canonization in 1323 by Pope John XXIII was only the beginning of a recognition that has extended through the centuries. The Church proclaimed him angelic doctor and patron of Catholic schools. His theological method, which harmoniously integrates faith and reason, became a model for generations of theologians. Pope Leo III, in his encyclical Aeterni Patris, 1879, proposed Thomism as the foundation for the renewal of Christian philosophy, initiating a movement that continues to this day. The relevance of Thomistic thought is evident in its ability to engage with contemporary issues. His reflections on natural law, ethics, and politics continue to offer valuable perspectives for addressing the moral and social challenges of our time. Universities and study centers dedicated to his thought multiply around the world. His work remains the subject of research and debate, demonstrating a vitality that transcends eras and cultures. The example of his life, which admirably united intellectual pursuit with personal holiness, continues to inspire those who seek truth with sincerity of heart. Chapter 13. Miracles and Popular Devotion. Thomas Aquinas' sanctity manifested not only in his wisdom, but also in the numerous miracles attributed to his intercession. From the moment of his death, the faithful began to report extraordinary graces received through his mediation, especially in matters related to study and spiritual discernment. One of the most notable miracles occurred at the Fossa Nova monastery shortly after his death. A monk suffering from a severe eye disease was instantly healed by touching the saint's body. This was only the first of a series of extraordinary events that confirmed Thomas's sanctity in the eyes of the faithful populace. Popular devotion to St. Thomas quickly spread throughout Europe. Students began to invoke him as the patron of studies, and universities adopted him as a special protector. The custom of praying the prayer of Saint Thomas before study became popular in Catholic educational institutions. The saint's relics became objects of great veneration. The translation of his remains to Toulouse in 1369 was an occasion for numerous manifestations of popular faith. Pilgrims flocked in large numbers to seek his intercession, especially in matters related to mental clarity, discernment, and wisdom. Devotion to St. Thomas has taken different forms over the centuries, always maintaining the core of the search for truth and wisdom. Today, students, teachers, theologians, and faithful from around the world continue to seek his intercession, finding in him a model of integration between faith and reason, intellectual pursuit, and personal holiness. Chapter 14, Prayer to Saint Thomas Aquinas. O glorious Saint Thomas, light of the Church and doctor of truth, perfect example of the union between faith and reason, who with your life and doctrine taught us the path of wisdom. You who drank from the purest sources of tradition and knew how to renew it with the light of your intelligence, help us to keep the flame of truth alive amidst the darkness of our time. Master of charity and prudence, who in your disputes sought not to conquer but to illuminate, teach us to defend the truth with love and to recognize it wherever it is found. Angelic Doctor, who contemplated divine mysteries with the pure gaze of faith and reason, guide us on our path toward the supreme truth that is God Himself. May your intercession grant us the grace to unite, as you did, study with prayer, intellectual pursuit with the holiness of life, love of truth, with love of God and neighbor. Amen.